So as I'm still trying to think through what decision I want to make on the vaccine mandates, and kind of my compliance at my job, I can't help but find myself living through like a real life use case of a lot of the psychological um, issues and effects that we often talk about. Um, Conceptually, we spend a lot of time talking about uncertainty and authenticity and logic, and how when you're trying to make a decision, it's this calculation that's happening, and you're trying to be as intellectually sophisticated and thorough and kind of mathematically rigorous as you can be, gathering all the inputs, effectively weighting the inputs, running your calculation, and kind of using that objective approach to come to an answer. And in doing that, you're trying to overcome your own mind, because there are certain things in terms of that weighting of the inputs, or the weighting of the different aspects of it, that are skewed by your mind and by external influences that ultimately impact your mind. So in this case, for example, the fear of what other people are going to think, the fear of judgment, seems to loom large. It seems to weigh heavily in the equation, but conceptually, a Drogo is meant to account for that. It's meant to try and make the math and the input weighting as accurate as possible. To say, I'm going to do the work logically to think through this and make sure I understand how big of a concern that really should be, and how much of that is just created in my own mind and it's fear presenting itself as a bigger issue than it really is. And all of that makes sense in theory, right? Conceptually. But what I'm learning is, in practice, which I kind of knew, it's super hard. It's super hard to do that, because there is no footing. There is no solid footing to ground yourself in. You don't know anything for sure, right? Let's just stick with that fear of judgment piece. On the one hand, I look at it and I say, somebody could look at this and it might be true. Like, as we look back in history, I might be on the wrong side of this. People might say, like, how could you have been against the mandates? Like, it was so obvious that the science supported it and that it's going to save people's lives and it was critical for us to do, and you're taking a stand on it, you're opposed to it. Like, are you a crazy Trump supporter? Do you want people to die? Are you just stupid? Are you just completely irrational? There's a fear of that, and it's a real fear, in that it's certainly a possibility, but the weighting of it is what I can't know, right? There's also a scenario which says, these are definitely a mistake, and to some extent people will look back and be like, wow, you actually stood up against it, good for you. Like, how hard it must have been to know at that time to do that, but you did the right thing. I don't know which of those it is. I don't know how people are going to judge me. I don't know what the impact of that judgment would be. So as I'm running through this calculation in my head and trying to determine it, there's just so many unknowns that I need to make guesses on and make assumptions on. And that's really, really hard. And what I find is, as you start to go through this, it becomes so easy and tempting to want to ground yourself in something. Like, that's what I find my mind struggling with the most. Like, I've literally woken up in the middle of the night. I've had trouble sleeping. Even during the day, as I'm running through this, I have this uncomfortable feeling and sensation of, I need to know something for sure. There's got to be something I can hold on to. There's got to be some thread I could grab, like logical thread, that tells me, like, okay, at least I know this. And without that, it's so tempting to just want to grab one and just create one, even if it's imagined in our own minds. And you can imagine how people that start out well-intentioned, start out thinking like, all right, I'm being very logical, I'm being very rational and objective, and I'm looking at this situation and I see a problem, and I think something needs to be done about it. And then as this process starts happening, right, as they start considering what action they're going to take and the ramifications of that action and how it might be perceived, and et cetera, you lose that thread, you lose that grounding, and you reach for the one that's most convenient. So in this case, for example, right, I'm vaccinated, I'm pro-vaccine, but I'm not comfortable with the mandates. It's very easy for me to slide into a role which says, what the Biden administration or Democrats or those that are pro mandate or liberals or whatever you want to call it are doing are wrong. Um, and that's the logical footing. That's the logical thread, the grounding I want to grasp into. They're doing something wrong. They're deceiving us. They're bad. And I know that at least. And that's what's guiding me. That's what's driving me. Or you can kind of do that same thing with, the people that are against the mandates, right? Those are good people. Those people aren't getting the respect they deserve. They need to be stood up for. The argument needs to be made, with them and for them of what they're trying to do and all that. And that's what I'll ground myself in. And how easy it is to slide into that and to lose that objectivity, to lose that rational thought in a trade-off almost for comfort. Because rationally, logically, I don't know. I can't say for sure. And likely it's somewhere in the middle, right? It's not that somebody's trying to intentionally hurt us, but there's still a risk. It's not that the people that are anti-mandate are completely right, but they might have a valid concern. It's somewhere in the middle. It's ambiguous. But that's uncomfortable, right? And the takeaway would seem to be which is almost cliched, you have to get comfortable with that uncomfortableness. You have to get uncomfortable swimming around in that idea of I'm never going to know for sure. But at the same time, there are going to be real life consequences to whatever decision I make. And getting your mind around that and being okay with it is maybe one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, if not the hardest. It's almost shocking to me, as much as I've talked about this and thought about it and understood it, how hard this actually is. And it's not hard in like the volume of work that needs to be done. It's not hard in like there's actual like physical pain or suffering involved necessarily. It's just hard because it's so unnatural. It's so unnatural and feels so wrong to be in this state of uncertainty on something this big where I know I have to make a decision. It'd be one thing if I didn't have to make a decision. There was no call to action for me and I was just on the fence and I was like, I don't know. I could see both sides, which is normally where I sit. But now I'm being thrust into this position of you can't stay on the fence. You have to make a decision. And it's hard. And it's hard. And I guess, in theory, logic should be the savior here. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I've always said. I've said in moments like this where you are kind of floating in the dark, you need to find that actual big L logical thread to hold on to and follow that wherever it goes. You need to follow the logic. And I think that's what I need to continue to do, and I think I am doing that. It's just as you follow that thread, it can take time. It can lead you places you didn't expect for it to lead you to, and you still have those same challenges of the mind arising as you go through it. So holding on to that thread can be tough because it's not a comforting thread, right? It's not a stake in the ground. It's a thread that's kind of floating. It's very easy to lose. It doesn't give you a lot of security, but I think it's the best thing we have. So I'm trying to maintain that and resist the temptation, resist that strong gravitational pull towards comfort to say, I don't give a shit if it's logical or not. I just need something to say, to tell my mind, you can turn off, this is what it is, this is what we're doing, and be done with it. But I know that's not the right answer.